Well, hello, happy Thursday to everyone. It's time for the weekly Q&A session. I am switching it up a little bit where I'm only going to be addressing one question a week. I feel that a 40 to 60 minute video, like who has the time really to go through all of that? I know I don't. So I wanted to do one question where it's like a 10 to 15 minute video, and then that allows people to really figure out how to get the answers, and it's so much easier in terms of getting the answers. Whereas if I have the 9-10 questions or more, then it becomes difficult to find the answers because then you have to go through that whole video to find them. So I hope that everyone likes this new sort of format for the Q&A. We'll still be here every Thursday at noon answering questions, and still feel free to please send the questions out. I will normally pick the two questions that are the most commonly asked, and then kind of like I did the other day is put out a survey to see what it is everyone wants in terms of the question. So it was overwhelming that the people wanted to hear the answering the weakness question. So the question that I got most often was like, how do I answer the weakness question? What do I do when I'm faced with the weakness question? So I definitely want to get into that today. But just like normal, I do like to provide a little bit of an update. So first things first, I have the Get Noticed Resume and LinkedIn workshop next Tuesday at 1 p.m. at the Tansley Tansley Library, sorry. I will pop the link to register below. Bring your resume, because the first half, it's about a 2-hour session. The first half hour is me going through how to write a resume and how to do a LinkedIn profile. It's like 30 to 45 minutes. And then from there, we will break off into individual one-on-one sessions with me, where you bring your resume and we sit down and we talk about it. So I provide lots of feedback and little tips. And then what happened last time was people would take the feedback, make any of the changes to the resume, and then they would email it to me, and I would then do another quick check. So I'm super happy to do that with anyone, and I hope to see you out there. The other thing is the Facebook group. So I'm thinking of launching the Facebook group probably next week. So this is the Halton Career Networking Group. So looking forward to doing that. I think that'll be fun, and it'll be a way to engage with people within Halton in terms of helping to build the network to help with getting your career forward and finding any new jobs. So those are, I think that's about it in terms of what I wanted to touch base with you on. So let's get to it. So I know with my clients, the weakness question, we can sometimes devote a whole session to just dealing with the weakness question. It is the question probably feared by most interviewees. And the thing is I don't want you to be afraid of it. To me, the weakness question is one of the greatest opportunities you could have during an interview to create a connection with the interviewer. So it can be pretty powerful. And I want you to know that the weakness question is not there to trip you up by any means. It is not to have you state that you're not good for the job. It is like they're not trying to trick you. It isn't about that at all. What it is about is getting a sense of your level of self-awareness. And essentially, are you capable of recognizing a weakness or inefficiency, an obstacle, something that can get in the way of you succeeding? Are you able to, first of all, recognize it, which is sometimes the hardest part? And then are you able to do something about it? Are you able to come up with a plan to manage that obstacle or overcome that obstacle? But in many cases, it's managing. And then are you able then to move forward from that? So it is more of a self-awareness question than it is like a negative type question. Weakness questions I have found to be a lot more popular these days, and not just your traditional, what is your greatest weakness, or tell me about your greatest weakness. There's many different iterations of the weakness question. So you do need to be prepared to talk about difficult times that you have had in your career, whether it was like you based, or whether it's the project going off rails, whether it's not being able to meet a deadline, or not getting along with your team or your boss, or an angry or irate client. You need to be able to talk about these stories in a way that you're not self-defensive. Okay, that is one of the biggest things I see. There's three big things I saw as a recruiter. One is sort of that defensive stance. And that usually in a weakness question is like, oh, wasn't really me. Like maybe my boss saw that as a weakness, but he didn't really understand what he was talking about. So there's that sort of defensive type answer, which is not good. Like obviously you're not very self-aware because everyone has a weakness. Number two, and sometimes it's the joke. I don't really have any weaknesses, or that's a really tough question because I don't know the answer. Like that is, like I know it's good to sometimes crack jokes, but that's an overused joke. It's comes across typically as defensive and a little annoying to a recruiter, an interviewer, or a hiring manager. So I wouldn't do that joke. The second thing is the weakness that's not really a weakness, which like I know 15 years ago when I started doing interview preps, it was always, let's come up with a weakness that's not really a weakness as a way to address this question. A good one would be perfectionism. But the problem is now everyone uses that. And everyone uses weaknesses that aren't really weaknesses. And it doesn't necessarily tell the recruiter and hiring manager, now that I've been on the other side for so long, it doesn't tell us how you handle issues, how you handle difficult times. And that's what we want to know with this question. We don't want to hear a weakness that's not really a weakness. We want to know about how you get through the roller coaster that is a career. Like that's normal life. So don't do the weakness that isn't the weakness. And the other one is using like a technical thing. So like I didn't used to be that good at Excel, but then I took all these courses and now I'm the team's go-to person. That's kind of a cop-out to me, in my opinion, a cop-out one. When you're using a hard skill as a weakness, it's a pure cop-out because anyone can learn. Anyone can take courses, and some people may be a little bit better at it than others, but anyone can learn a hard skill. It is not something that is innate, and it's easier to recognize a lack of knowledge. It's a lot harder to recognize something that is truly holding us back in terms of getting to our success. Okay, so avoid those three things. So defensive answers, the weakness that's not really a weakness, and the hard skill cop-out answer. Okay, if you're having trouble, and a lot of people have trouble once we sort of get past that, in terms of figuring out what is it then that I should be using for a weakness. One great way is to use assessments. Now, I love assessments, as you may know, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that I recommend you do an assessment. But assessments aren't just great in terms of figuring out a career match or figuring out your strengths. It's a great way to come up with some weaknesses. So if you go to one, for example, the one I always recommend, 16personalities.com, it's a 12-minute Myers-Briggs type indicator test. And there's a page, half a page, on weaknesses. And what that will provide is it may trigger a memory of something, of a time in your career where maybe one of those weaknesses did come to play and did cause you some challenges that you needed to overcome. So though, that's a great place to start. Another area to look at would be performance reviews with previous managers. So does anything stand out in your mind in terms of areas of improvement that they talk to you about? And again, staying away from the hard skills. It could be client management. It could be how you work within a team. It could be time management is sometimes a big one. Communication skills. So thinking about what you and your previous or current boss managers spoke about for ways that you or areas that you should develop and improve upon. And then you can ask family and friends, or just have like a good old, heart to heart with yourself, really doing some self-analysis, figuring out, going back throughout your career and thinking about those times that were tough. Why were they tough? Was there anything, any soft skills that you maybe not caused, but led to that difficult time? And that when you did some of that work on yourself, it actually made things easier or things got better because of that. So think about all of that. Now, what to do with it all. So the typical format for weakness is you state what the weakness is, what was your process of getting over it, and the result. Like, how is it now? And I do really like that. It is nice and simple, but I do like to add more, because to me, I want it to be the journey. Okay, because everyone loves a journey. Everyone loves a comeback story. Those are the things that resonate most with individuals. And when you think about media, when you think about the reality TV shows like Bachelor and Survivor, when you think about the movies, and like maybe the Avengers series, I haven't really watched many, so I can't say too much about that, or books, a lot of people like the journey sort of edit or journey stories where someone is transformed, or the comeback stories. No one, like, there's a reason why magazine covers always have so-and-so is back, better than ever. People love those stories of overcoming and getting better because of going through those challenges. So think about when you're coming up with your story, think about how you can create that story to be a story of your journey of who you are today and what you overcame to get there. So you would start off the answer to this with what the weakness is. But then the key is you need to talk about how did it get in the way? How did it hinder your success? How did it prevent you from moving forward? You need to talk about that. A journey story isn't a journey story without that piece. Talk about how you recognized it. What was your like rock bottom, so to say, where you were like, okay, things have got to change. This is not working. I need to work on this in order to get better, to be more successful, to finally get unstuck and move forward. And then talk about how you sort of dealt with it. So now that you know that it was a problem, now that you know what you need to overcome it, how did you overcome it? What were the steps that you took? What was the process that you sort of implemented or created to overcome it? And then talk about how going through that process got you to where you were today. Maybe it was a difficult firing of someone and maybe it was a difficult firing of a person who was a friend, and now you are their manager. And it was sort of recognizing that piece, but going through that made you the leader you are today. Like, thinking about it in that sense and finishing off with you couldn't be who you are. You could not have gotten to where you are in your career if you hadn't have gone through that. And let me tell you, those stories are incredibly powerful. I've had a few people in my career tell me those stories, and I've interviewed 10,000 people, maybe, I don't know, probably in and around there, a lot of people, and there's probably about 5 to 10 individuals that gave me a journey story for the weakness. And I remember them. I remember them in so much detail, whether they were like 10 years ago. It feels like it was just like yesterday. And I remember watching the hiring manager and the impact it had on the hiring manager and the hiring manager's desire to hire them simply because of the story, the journey story of that. And some of these weren't even career weaknesses. One of my favorite, this is a fairly recent, he flunked out of third year school and thought he wasn't going to go back. And he had sort of like a dead end job. And he's sitting in his dead end job and was like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? This is not what I wanted to do. So he picked himself back up, got his life back together, got back into fourth year school, and then graduated top of his class. And it was obviously a lot longer than that. But most people would never tell someone to say in an interview or to admit in an interview that they flunked out of school. But if you were able to pick yourself back up and then graduate with distinction, like that's one heck of a story. And he got hired and like he's doing incredible. I just heard yesterday how much like they adore and love him, and how they recognize that tenacity in him from that story. They still bring up that story. So that's such a long way to say how much I love the weakness question, because it can create those connections and really make you stand out from the crowd when everyone else is saying, oh, I'm a perfectionist, or, my attention to detail, sometimes it slows me down. Like it just, when you lean into it and you really tell a story, it will get you hired, honestly. It really, truly will. So that's it for the weakness question. I hope that helps, and I hope this little format is much better and more appreciated. I am going to include sort of a layout of what I talked about in an article on the blog, and I'll link to it. I don't think I linked to things last week, actually, come to think of it. Sorry about that. And I will include the links to anything else I talked about. If your weakness question or any other ways, answers to questions, so the whole interview process just really freaks you out, reach out. Having a good coach, having a good training session can help. It is like one ruined interview can ruin your whole job search, honestly. So a couple $100 on interview coaching, honestly, I think it's a very good investment for your future. So if that is something of a concern, definitely email me and let me know what you want me to answer next week. Dylan already mentioned some job search strategies, so I just want to narrow that down a bit. And anyone else, reach out, email, Facebook, whatever. Let me know what you want answered. Okay, have a good week. Take care. Bye, everyone.